Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we're revisiting two terrible social justice warrior talking points that are bad for two very different reasons. And I'm not trying to rehash this nonsense for no reason either. I wouldn't waste our time on it usually, but the radical leftists are bringing both of these failed premises back into public discourse this week. So if they're going to keep pushing their awful talking points, we're going to have to respond and bat them down accordingly. As I said, both of these topics have been covered extensively in the public and on this show specifically too. The first of which being an anti-manspreading chair, which we discussed specifically over the summer in another video. And also we've talked about how anti-manspreading in general is just really anti-male bigotry for years now. And then there's this anti-clapping campaign, which we also made a video about last summer. Links to all of those below too, by the way. And also with the anti-clapping typically being proposed at college campuses and public events, which are getting increasingly more left-wing dominated and liberal indoctrinated, well, these kinds of college public stories and issues are worrisome on their own too, which is another topic that's made it onto this show repeatedly as well. Finally, there's one more connecting thread that ties both of today's returning stories together. This is all happening in Great Britain, one of the most lost left-wing and sadly pro-SJW places in the world right now. You can get arrested for saying naughty words in Britain these days, and you also need a license to look at naughty videos on the internet. And in addition, some of the worst liberal, socialist, and Marxist propaganda keeps coming out of there too, like these two left-wing memes coming back into the news today. They really shouldn't be coming back into vogue either, since they were terrible, awful ideas and they were batted down right from the beginning. No one ever liked these themes, and people even counter-argued and ridiculed these premises repeatedly at the time, over and over since then too, but regardless, SJWs are bringing them back anyway, as if they were never wrong in the first place, and they're pretending nothing bad or stupid happened before when they presented them initially. With that said, let's start by going over the anti-manspreading chair again. The return of this story appears to be just simply a repost of the original story, which came out over the summer. For some reason, out of seemingly nowhere, Mashable wanted to repost this story about some woke artist making a lame, basic, uncomfortable chair or two, which attempt to make some kind of special inspired message. Mashable even has the gall to say this anti-manspreading chair is absolutely brilliant, even though it's clearly not. The chairs look completely the opposite of brilliant, actually. They're just these basic flat triangles of wood put right on top of four plain chair legs. No style or color or finish or anything put into them. No real hard work whatsoever. All we got is some woke SJW who thinks it's cool and hip to hate on men, telling us we can't sit a certain way even when they're allowed to sit that way themselves. Complaining about manspreading on public transportation is one thing. There are some instances where people take up too much space and should be giving up that space to other passengers. The thing is though, this isn't a strictly male phenomenon. Women can take up too much space on trains and buses too, but since men are bigger on average and we tend to sit with our legs more spread out because we have things in between them, of course, well, that means left-wing feminists like women are going to attack and shame us for doing something they do too, and also something that can't usually be helped because of our male biology. It's kind of like shaming a woman for going to the bathroom a lot when it's their time of the month. Surely they would respond and say that's sexist and it's part of their biological makeup and they can't help it. But turn that situation around, and if men have the same or a similar issue and the same defense available, well, no one will afford us that benefit of the doubt because, I don't know, SJWs blame the patriarchy or some shit. Let's go ahead and quickly look at some of this video from Mashable anyway and see what else they have to say about this anti-manspreading chair. How come all of the men they're supposedly teaching how to sit here, well, how come none of them are actually looking like real men? I guess only the most beta males ever would agree to be a part of this anti-male, anti-masculinity disaster. This is the second dude in this video with a ponytail, and it's only been 20 seconds. And he's also like half the size of that feminist there sitting to the right of him. Also, I don't understand why they have a chair that's teaching women to manspread. I mean, according to their logic, it kind of makes sense to have an anti-manspreading chair chair as a way to teach men to sit with their legs more closed, but then why would you also have a chair that's pro-manspreading and teaching people how to do it? That doesn't make sense. And it just goes to show they're not actually anti-manspreading. They are teaching their preferred people how to manspread more, actually. So that means, in reality, they're not actually anti-manspreading at all. They're just against men in general and us taking up space in public places. Make no mistake, guys, this is just classic feminist anti-male propaganda, disguised as a needed service that claims to teach men how to sit in more respectful or space-conscious ways, supposedly. But these SJWs don't want to be respectful and space-conscious themselves. Oh no. And that means, essentially, they're claiming to be helping us all, when really they're just helping themselves, and shitting on people they don't like. They're masking their anti-male hatred and bigotry and acting as if they're doing us all a big favor. Pretty straightforward double standard right here. Men are taught to sit with their knees together, an uncomfortable position for most males, by the way. This would be equivalent to, say, making women strap down their chests and tie up their hair because they're taking up too much space for the men. And women would never agree to do this because that puts them in an awkward position there. And they would call us sexist for even suggesting it. But at the same time, they have no self-awareness when they happily put others in an awkward position themselves, just to make themselves feel a bit more comfortable, and also more likely to make themselves feel important and like they're in charge and they can boss everyone around. That's where I think a lot of this anti-manspreading bullshit comes from anyway. SJWs want and need to boss everyone around. Even if we're not doing something wrong, they'll just make shit up anyway. Like, don't say this word, don't sit this way, and as with our next story, don't clap in these places or situations because someone might, maybe, could be, possibly offended. That brings us to the next crazy SJW idea coming out of Britain this week. Despite it also being a failed idea that couldn't stand up to public scrutiny long ago. We're of course talking about the banning of clapping. You know, clapping when people quickly slap their hands together to make a supportive sound to show you appreciate or support a public speaker or performer. Yeah, well now, again, feminists are attempting to ban this practice. There's a few different reasons for this too, mostly to do with eliminating loud noises from public spaces like universities, which is where these attempted bannings are taking place over on the other side of the pond. And also, in addition, I think there's some level of fairness or appropriateness being argued for this too, meaning some want to ban clapping because it's too supportive. And if people don't clap for everyone in the same way, they shouldn't be clapping for anyone at all. Leftists always hate the winner and loser dynamic, and they support things like participation trophies. So that may be the root of this thing again too. Let's not speculate any further though, and go ahead and turn to this video in question. This anti-clapping premise recently came back as a topic on a talk show called Good Morning Britain. In this video, they ask and discuss the question, should we ban clapping? Let's go ahead and take a look.
What is upsetting, genuinely, about clapping?
So it's actually not just for people with anxiety, it's also people who use hearing aids. Clapping can be disruptive to that. People who have sensory processing issues, it can be very distressing and overwhelming to have those loud, sudden noises.
Well, if you're too disturbed and your anxiety is so bad you can't handle some clapping, then you probably should be very careful where you go out in public. The burden is on you, unfortunately, to be aware of that and avoid places with things that might trigger you, especially if they're such common and everyday things like a round of applause. Clapping isn't even that hard to avoid, actually, and it's not that common. I mean, it's not like you can accidentally walk into a comedy club or stumble upon a political rally with some stump speeches. I think you could easily go weeks and weeks without seeing clapping, without even really having to try. And if you put a little thought and effort into it, you could easily avoid clapping all year, but God forbid your life and your body is your responsibility these days. Liberals love making everyone else uncomfortable and putting out the 99% of people instead of just helping and making it easier for that small 1% to avoid things like this, or to withstand them at some point by, say, using earplugs, headphones, vision adapters, or something else to help. And sure, this purple-haired feminist on the show tries to make it sound like there are lots of people that are triggered by clapping, but I highly doubt it's more than a few, and it's certainly not more than 1 or maybe 2% of the country. Really, I just see this as another bright-haired, colored-having, broken woman trying to boss everyone around in order to make herself feel better about having a shitty life with no friends and no relationship, and the only thing to come home to is 21 cats that she cries to sleep with every night.
Or you go to a gig, you would expect that people would clap.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be preventing people from going to those events, which is a real shame. So if some theatres or some universities say, actually, we're going to be more inclusive and do jazz hands instead, that would be lovely. More people could get involved.
And then
My God, look at those crazy eyes. She's getting elated just at the thought of possibly getting to boss everyone around too. Jazz hands, by the way, are when you just stick your arms and hands up in the air and shake them, instead of the traditional clapping and throwing your hands together. And supposedly jazz hands are more inoffensive and inclusive, but that's all based on the false assumption that if we stop clapping, more people could come to these events. That could in there is very important because it shows that this premise is all based on an untested possibility, which is being assumed to be true by some not so smart and biased people like this purple-haired woman on the show. And should we really be taking advice from a person with crazy eyes and clown hair like this anyway? She sounds worse than those she's advocating on behalf of. In fact, I bet people who get triggered by clapping probably don't even care about this at all. They might, or maybe, or they could just want to stay home anyway. Who knows? If she's going to guess and assume what they think and want, we can just guess and assume in the same way too. Except when they do it, this purple-headed people eater is just trying to virtue signal and get more attention for herself actually. She really doesn't care about the other people that she's defending. She just wants the public to see her defending them. And that way she can try and make herself look more noble and virtuous. But fortunately, we can all see through this rather thinly veiled charade.
I don't think there's going to be a penalty, frankly. I don't think anyone's going to say, like, you need to leave. But if you were persisting with clapping, even though you've been requested to do something, that's not very polite, is it? Like, I think people understand if you're requested to do something in a specific context.
Well, it's also impolite to come into someone else's place and space and tell them to stop doing their traditional and supportive clapping practice. Clapping has been a part of entertainment, concerts, theater, stand-up comedians, and public speaking and public gatherings for generations. It's been around before anxiety even existed. But now we got some soft and weak-willed liberals coming around, all empowered in Britain by their overly apologetic and pro-SJW government and media sympathizing with them too much, and well, now the social justice warriors are taking over, and they'll happily boss everyone around and destroy all our traditions, and frankly, make many more others much more uncomfortable while they do it. Their willingness to put everyone else out besides themselves and their preferred groups really says a lot too. And also, imagine if it was a different group having a different similar tradition that triggered people, would they be asked to stop what they're doing? This SJW wouldn't dare go after a Native American tribe in their reservation and tell them they can't dance and sing and play their drums because it might trigger some small 1% of people who don't even care to complain for themselves. Or what if it was a black Southern Baptist church singing and dancing loudly at their Sunday service? Do you think this SJW would go in and tell them to use jazz hands now instead because it might maybe be excluding someone possibly if they keep being too loud there? Well, we all know the answers to these kinds of questions, and we all know leftists wouldn't bother or pester or try and boss around minorities in this way at all. It's only the white majority who gets shit on and told what to do here, because SJWs want to treat us like they're little pets who can only do or go or eat or sleep or clap or breathe when and where they say it's okay.
I think that's definitely possible, but we shouldn't kind of meet the expectations of those judgmental people. There's a lot of anger towards people with allergies as well. Say on planes, if you're not allowed to have nuts, you'll find people saying, oh, I can't believe I'm not allowed to have my Snickers.
Definitely a real crazy one right here. Apparently people who like clapping are now judgmental and don't deserve the right to an opinion or a preference, even though we're the greater majority of the country and the world. Well done, lady. You just played yourself. Not only did she reveal her bias and bigotry against the average person, but also she's shown that her and other SJWs, they will defend any minority they can think of in any insane way possible, as long as they think they can, 1, boss around more people, and 2, make themselves look better and noble for defending the minorities. Give me a break. Banning clapping is just as silly and dumb as anti-manspreading, and both are non-problems that distract us from real-world issues that actually matter. What do you guys think? Was the anti-manspreading chair really just low-key anti-male bigotry? And should we ban clapping, which is preferred by 99% of the world? And that would mean we'd have to move to jazz hands, which is being requested by the 1% supposedly. Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.